when the world doesn't understand you, and you keep creating anyway. This story is about finding meaning inside madness, about how pain can become power, and how beauty can survive even when the artist cannot. Vincent Van Gogh's life was filled with struggle, loneliness, and rejection. But from that suffering came some of the most emotional and unforgettable paintings in human history. He didn't paint what he saw. He painted what he felt. And that's what made him immortal. So get ready for a story that will touch your heart, break it, and rebuild it again, one brushstroke at a time. And yes, this video will also help you learn English in the most powerful way. As you listen, you'll hear real emotional English, full of deep words, real feelings, and living language. So sit back, dim the lights, and let me tell you the story of Vincent Van Gogh, the man who painted his pain. We begin not with color or canvas, but with silence, because Vincent Van Gogh's story begins in silence. He was born on March 30th, 1853, in a small Dutch village called Zundert. The skies were gray, the land was flat, the wind was cold. But the silence wasn't only around him, it lived inside him. Here's something most people don't know. Vincent was born exactly 1 year after his parents' first son had died, a baby who was also named Vincent. When the second Vincent was born, he was given the same name, the same birthday, the same place. Can you imagine growing up with your own name carved on a gravestone? Every Sunday, on his way to church, he would pass a tombstone that read, Vincent Van Gogh, born March 30th, 1852, died March 30th, 1852. He was born into grief, not joy. He didn't just carry his name, he carried the ghost of the brother he never met. Vincent's father was a Protestant pastor, strict, distant, and cold. His mother was serious, disciplined, and deeply religious. Vincent was not playful or easy to raise. He was sensitive, quiet, and different. He walked alone through fields. He stared at flowers for hours. He spoke more with nature than with people. Other children didn't understand him. Teachers didn't understand him. Even his parents didn't understand him. But he had one light, his younger brother Theo Van Gogh. Theo was gentle, kind, and endlessly supportive. He believed in Vincent when no one else did. Their bond would become one of the most powerful relationships in the history of art. Without Theo, there would be no Vincent. And that's not a metaphor. That's a fact. As a child, Vincent didn't dream of painting. He didn't think he was talented at anything. At 11, his parents sent him to boarding school. He hated it. He was bullied, lonely, and begged to come home. But his father replied, "You must become a man." So Vincent obeyed. He always obeyed. He tried to please everyone, his parents, his teachers, society. He wanted to be useful, to matter, to belong. But no matter how hard he tried, he always felt like a failure. At 16, he began working for an art dealership called Goupil & C. Thanks to his uncle, he was sent first to The Hague, then to London, and later to Paris. For the first time, he was surrounded by art, but not as a painter, as a salesman. Still, he was happy for a while. He walked through London streets with a book tucked in his coat, dreaming of love and meaning. He fell deeply in love with Ursula, the daughter of his landlady. He imagined marrying her, building a life with her. But when he confessed his feelings, she laughed and said she was already engaged. Vincent's heart shattered. He couldn't understand. He believed love would come if he were honest. But life wasn't fair, and the world didn't care. That rejection marked him deeply. After that, something inside him changed. He grew quiet, strange, and obsessed with religion. He stopped caring about selling art, stopped speaking to customers, and began quoting Bible verses at work. Eventually, he was fired, but he didn't feel angry. He felt called. Maybe, he thought, this was a sign. So he decided to become a preacher like his father. He went to Belgium, living among poor coal miners, preaching, helping, giving away everything he had. He wore rags, shared their food, and slept on floors. He wanted to suffer like them, to feel their pain, to serve something holy. But even there, the church rejected him. They said he was too emotional, too unstable, too extreme. He was dismissed once again. Vincent was now 27, with no job, no love, no future. He had failed as a son, failed as a preacher, failed as a man. But in that dark silence, something new began to whisper inside him. A voice said, "Then I will be a painter." After being dismissed from the mission, Vincent wandered to the gray, frozen streets of Borinage, a coal-mining region in Belgium. He had nothing, no money, no purpose, except a deep, burning need to express something words could no longer hold. He lived among miners with blackened faces, cracked hands, and coughing lungs. He saw their wives washing clothes in icy rivers, their children barefoot and hungry. He shared their meals and their pain. And one thought grew inside him. If he couldn't preach with words, maybe he could preach with color. He began drawing what he saw, the workers, the mothers, the tired children. His lines were rough, his figures imperfect, but they were alive. Every stroke carried emotion, and for the first time, Vincent felt he was doing something real. He decided, "I will become an artist." It was 1880. He was 27. Most people give up at that age. He was just beginning. Vincent had no money for paints or brushes. He used charcoal, pencils, and cheap paper. He taught himself perspective, anatomy, and shading from books and from nature itself. He studied light, the way it touched the fields, the way it fell on faces. He believed that to paint life, you must first live it. His first mentor was his cousin by marriage, Anton Mauve, a professional painter in The Hague. Mauve taught him how to mix paints and prepare canvases. Vincent respected him deeply. But, as always, his relationships were complicated. He was intense, obsessive, emotional. He could paint for days without eating, then collapse from exhaustion. He didn't want perfection in technique. He wanted truth in emotion. Mauve once said, "You have talent, Vincent, but you must control your emotions." Vincent replied, "If I control my emotions, there will be no art." That was his truth. During this time, Vincent met Clena Maria Hornick, known as Scene. She was poor, a former seamstress, a prostitute, and a single mother. Most people looked down on her. But Vincent saw something beautiful beneath the pain. He invited her and her little daughter to live with him. He gave them food, warmth, and care. He painted her often, holding her child, sitting by a window, sewing quietly. For Vincent, it wasn't just love, it was compassion. He wanted to show that even the broken deserve beauty, that every soul carries dignity. But society didn't understand. His family was horrified. They said the woman he loved was a disgrace. His father called the relationship sinful. Even his mentor, Mauve, stopped speaking to him. But Vincent defended Scene fiercely. He saw in her what others refused to see, humanity. Yet, deep inside, he was breaking again. After 2 years of struggle, the pressure became unbearable. He had no money, no support, and too much emotional weight. Finally, he left her. It destroyed him. But he also knew he couldn't save her if he couldn't even save himself. That heartbreak bled into his art. You can feel in his early paintings, dark browns, heavy blacks, deep grays. They were sad, heavy, but full of truth. After leaving The Hague, Vincent moved back with his parents in a small Dutch village called Nuenen. He set up a tiny studio in their house and began painting the peasants and workers around him. His father still didn't believe in him. He thought painting was a childish dream. But Vincent worked harder than ever. He woke before dawn, walked for hours across the countryside, and studied the faces of farmers and women in the fields. He didn't want to paint the rich or the beautiful. He wanted to paint reality, the sweat, the dust, the rough hands that fed the nation. After 5 years of self-teaching and endless practice, he painted what he called his first real masterpiece, The Potato Eaters, 1885. It showed a poor family sitting around a dimly lit table, eating potatoes with their hands. Their faces were rough, their skin dark, their eyes tired, yet there was warmth in their togetherness. Vincent said, "I wanted to show that these people have earned their food honestly. They have tilled the earth themselves." The painting was raw, earthy, and emotional, exactly what he wanted, but the art critics hated it. They called it ugly, unrefined, and poorly painted. Vincent was crushed, but not broken. He wrote to Theo, "I would rather paint one honest face full of wrinkles than 100 smooth ones full of lies." That one line captures the soul of Van Gogh, a man who cared more about truth than perfection. Throughout these years, Vincent wrote hundreds of letters to his brother Theo. These letters remain among the most beautiful ever written, filled with emotion, dreams, gratitude, and doubt. Theo wasn't just a brother. He was Vincent's best friend, his emotional anchor, and his financial lifeline. Theo worked as an art dealer in Paris and sent Vincent small amounts of money every month so he could keep painting. In return, Vincent sent him sketches, paintings, and letters describing everything: his loneliness, his joy, his anger, his fear of failure. He wrote about the way sunlight changed the colors of the fields, about his desire to capture life before it faded. It's because of those letters that we now know how Van Gogh thought, felt, and saw the world. But life in Nuenen wasn't peaceful. The villagers whispered about him. They thought he was strange. He painted women in cottages and fields, and rumors spread quickly. Even his relationship with his father grew worse each day. Then, in 1885, tragedy struck. His father died suddenly of a heart attack. Vincent was devastated. He blamed himself, convinced that his stubbornness and temper had caused his father's stress. He carried the guilt silently, pouring it all into his art. Day after day, he stood in the cold, mixing paint with trembling hands, trying to turn sorrow into something beautiful. But deep inside, he was still lost. He needed a change, new air, new light, new inspiration. So in 1886, he made a decision that would change everything. He packed his brushes, his canvases, and his dreams, and left for Paris, where Theo lived. He believed Paris would open his world, that he would finally see the art, the colors, and the people that could help him grow. He said goodbye to the quiet village that never understood him and took the train toward the beating heart of modern art. He didn't know it yet, but Paris would bring him both color and chaos, friendship, discovery, and the beginning of madness. It was February 1886. When Vincent arrived in Paris, Theo welcomed him with open arms, but what he saw shocked him. Vincent looked like a ghost. Thin, pale, sickly. He had barely eaten. His clothes were worn, his body weak. But in his hands, he carried something priceless, his paintings. When Theo saw them, dark and heavy, he fell silent, because Paris had changed. The art world was no longer brown and gray. It was bursting with color. A revolution called Impressionism was transforming everything. At first, Vincent hated it. He thought it was too bright, too light, too happy. He missed the darkness, the depth, the emotion. But then he saw the works of Claude Monet, Edouard Manet, and Camille Pissarro, and something inside him shifted. He began to see how light could breathe life into color, how shadows could glow, how emotion could exist not in pain, but in beauty. He didn't copy them, he absorbed them. Slowly, his own art began to transform. The browns turned into blues. The blacks became gold. He discovered orange, violet, green, colors he had never dared to use before. He stopped painting peasants and began painting flowers, bridges, cafes, and city streets. His brushstrokes grew faster, thicker, wilder. He used paint like fire, burning emotion into canvas. His self-portraits became windows into his soul. In one, his eyes are calm. In another, they blaze with madness. In others, he looks exhausted because he painted constantly, sometimes 3 or 4 canvases in a single day. He barely ate, barely slept. Coffee, cigarettes, and passion kept him alive. He once said, "I put my heart and soul into my work, and I lose my mind in the process." And that was the truth. Paris was not only about color. It was about connection. Theo introduced Vincent to a circle of young artists who would one day become legends. Paul Gauguin, proud and mysterious. Henri Toulouse-Lautrec, short, wild, and brilliant. Émile Bernard, bold and experimental. Georges Seurat, the creator of pointillism. They spent long nights in smoky cafes, arguing about truth, beauty, light, religion, and madness. They painted together, dreamed together, and sometimes fought. But even in this new circle, Vincent struggled to belong. He was too intense, too emotional, too honest. Some admired him. Others avoided him. He was a storm in a room full of calm. Yet no one could deny one thing. His passion was unstoppable. Even those who found him strange knew he was real. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing truth. Through all this, Theo stood by him, patient, loyal, and quietly heroic. He paid for everything: Vincent's food, rent, paints, brushes, even medical bills. Even when Vincent argued, disappeared, or broke down, Theo never gave up on him. He tried to sell Vincent's paintings, but nobody wanted them. People said, "Too messy, too emotional, too wild. He'll never be successful." Theo wrote to a friend, "My brother may be mad, but his madness is purer." Imagine how painful that must have been, to see genius every day and know the world was blind. As Vincent's art grew brighter, his soul grew darker. He became more isolated, more anxious, more obsessed. He drank heavily, mostly absent, a powerful, dangerous drink. He worked all night, slept all day, living in a blur of color and exhaustion. He was now 35, a man consumed by light on the outside and swallowed by darkness within. He had no wife, no children, no fame, and no peace. Only art, loneliness, and Theo. His world was shrinking, but his soul was still fighting. Soon, his mind began to betray him. He started hearing voices, seeing things that weren't there, and falling into deep waves of despair. Yet, as his thoughts fractured, his art grew wilder, more alive, more electric. By 1888, Paris was suffocating him. The noise, the competition, the constant motion. He needed silence, sunlight, and air that didn't feel heavy. So he packed his paints, his canvases, his brushes, his entire world, and left Paris behind. His destination, Alls, a small town in the south of France, with a sun burned gold over the wheat fields and the skies stretched endless and blue. Vincent believed that in Alls he could finally build his dream, a place where artists could live and paint together. He called it the Yellow House. To him, it wasn't just a home. It was a vision, a sanctuary for art, emotion, and brotherhood. He dreamed of creating a family bound not by blood, but by color, passion, and truth. When he arrived in Alls in February 1888, the town was quiet. The streets glowed under soft sunlight. The fields shimmered in gold. And for the first time in years, Vincent felt something like peace. He rented a small house with pale yellow walls, painted it himself, and filled every room with his own work. He placed his easel by the window to chase the morning light. The yellow house became a reflection of his soul, fragile, bright, and burning. Then came the explosion of color. Vincent painted like a man on fire. The southern light consumed him, filled him, transformed him. He painted the fields, the wind, the bridges, the stars, everything that breathed. Every stroke was emotion, every canvas a confession. His colors turned fierce, golden yellows, deep blues, glowing oranges, and quiet violets. And among all his works, one subject became sacred, the sunflower. To most, it was just a flower. To Vincent, it was life itself, full of warmth, joy, and decay. He painted 7 versions of it, some alive, some dying, some open, some closed. To him, even the dying ones were beautiful. The sunflower is mine in a way, he wrote, and he was right. Nobody ever painted him like he did, and nobody ever will. While Vincent painted endlessly in alls, Theo kept supporting him from Paris. Money was still scarce. Critics still ignored him. But Theo never stopped believing. To help his brothers dream of an artist community, Theo reached out to another painter, Paul Gauguin. Gauguin was bold, talented, and restless, a man who painted with confidence and power. Theo offered him a deal. Go live with Vincent. Paint with him. I'll cover your expenses. Gauguin agreed. In October 1888, Gauguin arrived in Alls. Vincent was overjoyed. For months he had been preparing the Yellow House, decorating, painting, arranging every detail, even filling Gauguin's room with sunflowers. To Vincent, Gauguin wasn't just a guest. He was the beginning of the family he'd always dreamed of. At first, it was beautiful. They painted side by side, wandered through golden fields, debated art, drank wine, and painted portraits of each other. But beneath that beauty, tension grew. Vincent was sensitive, emotional, and open-hearted. Gauguin was proud, dominant, and distant. Vincent painted to express love. Gauguin painted to express control. Their visions collided. Arguments turned to shouting. Admiration turned to fear. Vincent adored Gauguin, yet dreaded losing him. Love and anxiety danced dangerously inside him, a storm waiting to break. And one night, it did. December 23rd, 1888. No one truly knows what happened, but it ended in tragedy. After a violent argument, Gauguin walked out into the night. Heartbroken, terrified, and alone, Vincent broke down. In a moment of unbearable pain, he took a razor and cut off his own ear. Not a cut, but the whole ear. He wrapped it carefully, walked through the cold night to a brothel, handed it to a woman named Rachel, and whispered, "Keep this carefully." Then he collapsed. He was found the next morning, barely alive. The town called him the Mad Painter. Gauguin left and never came back. The Yellow House, the dream of art and brotherhood, shattered. Vincent spent weeks in the hospital. Doctors called it acute mania with delirium. Today, it might be called bipolar disorder or severe depression, but back then, no one truly understood. The townspeople feared him now. They signed a petition to have him locked away. To them, he was no longer an artist, just a madman. But even in the hospital, Vincent painted. Bandaged, trembling, exhausted, he painted the doctors, the patients, the gardens. Because painting was his only way to stay alive. He wrote to Theo constantly, apologizing, crying through words, trying to make sense of his own mind. "I am not mad, or at least not always," he wrote. "But sometimes the darkness is louder than the light." And Theo replied with the kind of love that saves souls. "Paint when you can. Rest when you can't. I'll be here." That love, steady, unconditional, kept Vincent breathing. In January 1889, he returned home, but everything had changed. The Yellow House felt empty, haunted by silence. The neighbors avoided him. Children ran when he passed. The dream was gone. So in May 1889, Vincent made a choice that few understood. He voluntarily entered a mental hospital, not because he was forced to, but because he feared his own mind. He arrived at St. Remy de Provence, a quiet asylum surrounded by gardens and stone walls. And there, within that silence, He began to paint again, this time not to survive the world, but to survive himself. Thick stone walls kept the world out and the broken souls within. The rooms were small, their windows barred with iron. At night, the wind cried to the olive trees outside, echoing like ghosts across the courtyard. Yet inside that silence, Vincent did something no one expected. He turned the asylum into his studio. His cell was bare, a bed, a chair, a small table. But from its narrow window, he could see the gardens, the fields, and the distant hills of Provence. That tiny square of sky became his universe. When he was allowed to walk under supervision, he carried his paints into the courtyard. He studied every olive grove, every cypress tree, every flicker of wind through the wheat. Around him, other patients wandered aimlessly, some whispering to themselves, some lost in another world. But when Vincent painted, he was at peace. His brush silenced the storm in his mind. He wrote to Theo, "I feel calm when I paint. The suffering passes, and I feel harmony again." So he painted everything he could see, the gardens full of irises and roses, the endless corridors that echoed with footsteps, the doctors and attendants who cared for him, and again, his own face. Dozens of self-portraits, each one a mirror of his soul, sometimes fierce, sometimes frightened, sometimes peaceful, never the same. He wasn't painting his face. He was painting his spirit. His irises twisted in wild purple energy, alive and restless. His olive trees burned with movement, their branches curling like green fire. His cypresses reached upward like black flames clawing toward heaven. These weren't landscapes. They were as storms turned visible. And then came one sleepless night. That night, he painted the starry night. It wasn't the sky as it looked. It was the sky as he felt it. The motion, the energy, the fire beneath the silence. Swirls of blue and white spun together. Golden stars exploded like suns. A crescent moon burned above, and a black cypress rose like a question mark against the heavens. Below it all, a small village slept, peaceful under a cosmic storm. The stars were alive. The earth was still. Just like Vincent, chaos inside, calm outside. He wrote to Theo, "Why?" I asked myself, shouldn't the shining dots of the sky be as accessible as the black dots on the map of France? Just as we take the train to go to Tarascon or Rouen, we take death to go to Star. That single line revealed his truth. Even when he lived surrounded by darkness, he still looked up and believed in light. But peace never stayed long. His illness returned in violent waves. He suffered seizures, sudden, uncontrollable storms of the body and mind. He would collapse, shake, scream, then wake up confused and trembling. Sometimes he refused food. Sometimes he tore his clothes apart. Yet every time he recovered, he picked up his brush again. He didn't wait for his madness to disappear. He painted through it. He wrote, "There are moments when I am terribly anxious and I don't know why. But I must go on working as if nothing had happened." That sentence defines his genius. Not the art he made, but the courage to keep creating when his mind turned against him. Throughout his year in St. Remy, Vincent wrote over 150 letters to Theo. They were filled with tenderness, descriptions of color, emotion, and gratitude. He wrote about the cypresses that reached like souls toward heaven, about the wheat fields that made him think of eternity, and about feeling both trapped and strangely alive. And always, he thanked Theo for the money, the patience, the love. Theo's letters came back full of hope. He promised that one day the world would see what Vincent saw. He sent him supplies, kind words, and even other artists' paintings to study. That connection, two brothers writing across distance, became Vincent's only bridge to the world, his only proof that he still mattered. During that single year in the asylum, he created more than 150 paintings, a miracle of discipline and emotion. The Starry Night, Wheat Field with Cypresses, the olive trees, irises, the reaper, the sower. Each canvas shimmered with movement, as if his soul was breathing through the paint. Every stroke was both a prayer and a scream. Doctors noticed something profound. When he painted, his mind grew calm. Painting became his therapy, his medicine, his reason to stay alive. By early 1890, his condition began to ease. He was quieter, more focused, more hopeful. He longed for open skies again, for the sound of voices, for Paris, and most of all, for Theo. Then came the letter that moved him to tears. Theo had a son named Vincent Willem Van Gogh, after him. When Vincent read those words, he wept. For the first time, he felt that maybe his life meant something. But even joy carried shadows. Theo's health was failing. He was overworked, exhausted, struggling to support his new family. Vincent blamed himself. He wrote, "If I could be of some worth, if only to ease your burden, I should be glad to do so. But it seems I am fit for nothing." Still, he wanted to try again. He asked the doctors to let him leave and paint in freedom once more. After a year inside, they agreed. In May 1890, Vincent left St. Remy. He carried only his brushes, his paints, and his endless hunger for light. But beneath the joy, Vincent felt guilt. He knew Theo was struggling. His health was fading. His finances were collapsing, and he had a wife and a newborn child to care for. Vincent could feel the weight of it all. He once wrote, "I risk my life for my work, and my reason is half foundered in it." And later, "What can I do, my dear brother, except go on? I cannot be other than I am." Theo begged him to rest, but Vincent couldn't stop. He painted, as if he was racing against time itself. He said, "I am trying to do as much as I can before the light fades." Even as his letters grew calmer, his heart remained restless. Moments of silence swallowed him. He walked through the golden wheat fields alone, staring at the endless sky. To the villagers, he was a quiet man who always painted. Strange, gentle, and deeply lost in his own world. But inside, he felt like a burden. He feared Theo would lose his job because of him. He felt the same loneliness that had followed him all his life. So he painted, not to escape the darkness, but to speak through it. Every brushstroke became a battle against despair. Then came that Sunday afternoon. The sky was bright, the air warm. Vincent left the inn after lunch, carrying his paints and a revolver. He walked out to the wide wheat fields outside the village. Golden waves stretched to the horizon. Crows circled above like black thoughts. He set up his easel, and somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, a single gunshot echoed. As the sun went down, Vincent was seen walking back toward the inn, his shirt stained with blood, his hand on his chest. He climbed the narrow stairs to his small room and whispered, "I wanted to kill myself." When Dr. Gachet arrived, he saw there was no saving him. Vincent was calm. He simply said, "The sadness will last forever." Theo came as fast as he could. He sat by his brother's bed through the night. Vincent, weak and pale, asked about his nephew, about Joe, about life. Theo held his hand, crying quietly, and around 1 a.m, on July 29th, 1890, Vincent took one last deep breath, and the light went out. He was 37 years old. Theo wrote later, he wanted to die in peace, and I, who loved him, had to let him go. 2 days later, the people of Auvers carried his coffin to the village cemetery. It was covered with sunflowers, his sunflowers, and wild yellow flowers. His canvases were placed around him like silent witnesses. Dr. Gachet said, "He was a great artist, more than all of us together. He only wanted to express what was in his heart." Theo stood beside the grave, unable to speak. When the coffin was lowered, the air smelled of wheat and paint. Within 6 months, Theo's heart gave out too. He was only 33. He was buried in the Netherlands, but years later, his wife Jo moved his body beside Vincent's. Now, the two brothers rest together. Under the same sky they both loved, their graves covered with ivy, forever side by side. After their deaths, the world slowly began to wake up. Jo Van Gogh, Theo's wife, refused to let Vincent be forgotten. She gathered his paintings, his letters, his pain, his truth, and shared them with the world. She organized exhibitions, published his letters, and turned his tragedy into a legacy. Because of her, the world finally saw not a madman, but a visionary. Years passed. The paintings that once hung unsold in a yellow house now hung in museums across the world. Paris, New York, Amsterdam. Today they are worth millions. But their true value is not in money, it's in meaning. But he never stopped searching for truth. Vincent Van Gogh taught us that art is not about perfection. It's what he felt, not what he saw. He showed that even in pain, beauty can exist, that even in is about honesty. He painted darkness. A soul can still create light. He failed in school. He failed in love. He failed in business, in religion, in friendship. He painted when his hands trembled. He painted when no one believed in him, except one person, Theo. And that's one of the greatest lessons of all. Sometimes one person believing in you is enough. Enough to survive. Enough to keep creating. Enough to leave a mark on the world. Vincent proved that you can be poor and still give something priceless. That you can feel broken and still create something whole. That you can die unseen and still become eternal. He didn't just paint Starry Night. He painted what it feels like to be alive. Because to feel deeply, even when it hurts, is not weakness. It's art. And that is why his name will never fade. If the story touched your heart, if you learned something about art, about pain, or about life, then subscribe. Because here, we don't just teach English. We teach emotion. We teach truth. We help you grow, just like Vincent did, even in the darkest night. Someone is painting stars for you.